Thank you, Xavier, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to tell you the history of the Kids Magic Show. So today at 2 o'clock and at 7 o'clock, the kids are performing on stage, and the presentation is The Magic Through a Child's Eyes, Wayne Wissner, Magician, and the History of the Kids Magic Show. My father, Wayne Wissner, when he was 7 years old in 1955, got his first magic kit. And from that point on, he was hooked. He loved magic. And my grandfather, who loved playing piano and other instruments, probably thought, hey, this is a way for Wayne to become a performer. And my aunt, Linda, my dad's younger sister, was one of the first assistants for my dad. My dad had all sorts of different tricks. He started learning card tricks and table tricks. Some of these tricks were purchased, some of them were built. This is a disappearing and reappearing cane trick he used to do. Anytime magicians came into town, he was so excited he would go and watch the show. And my grandfather even took him to the magic capital of the world right here in Michigan, Colon, Michigan, towards our southern border, where every single summer there is this huge 5-day magic festival called the Abbott's Magic Gathering. My grandfather helped my dad build some of the illusions, like this sword trunk where you would put the swords in after you put a person inside. My Aunt Linda, when they would do shows like for the school, would be the main assistant. And my grandfather, who happened to be mayor just across the street, down the street there of Manistee, he was often in the parade, and my dad was often in the 4th of July parade as well. As my dad got into his teenage years, this would have been in the mid-60s, he really liked to have opportunities to perform, and his show got more elaborate. He got backdrops. He got doves, which are not a small feat because you have to care for those doves all year long. You have to keep their feathers trimmed so they won't fly away. And he became kind of the magician of Manistee for a time there when he was in his teens and early 20s. My uncle, Charlie, was the next assistant to come on board. He still lives in Manistee. He works in Ludington, and you can see this is about the cleanest I've ever seen him. He now sports a huge beard, and he's a mechanic, so he's very busy with stuff. Again, my Aunt Linda and my dad, my Uncle Charlie, and I believe this is in the backyard of my grandfather's house. My dad loves doing levitation, so you'll probably see a similar levitation many times in the photos here. Around the year 1968, 1969, pretty much, my dad was performing here. I think he said he did about 5 shows at the Ramsdell. Some were just him, some were like with the Cavalcade of Magic, where there were multiple magicians all performing together on the Ramsdell stage. He started having his business card, and you could call, and you'll notice this is before they had 3-digit prefixes, so 37533, 10th Street, Manistee. So that's where they lived, on 10th Street. My dad and my mom met. I don't remember the exact story, but my mom became the next assistant in the family. This picture was taken clearly down on 5th Avenue Beach right here in Manistee. Now, to find all these photos was not an easy thing. What I had to do is I had to go into Facebook, my dad's Facebook, and I had to search through like 6 years of posts, save every single photo, and then try to arrange them chronologically. And the way I did that was by facial hair. So this is the point where in 1970, 1971, he started sporting the mustache. He started doing performances around Michigan. Anyone who was interested in having a show. My mom's oldest brother, Don, is right there, Uncle Don. And again, a levitation. He loves doing levitations. My mom and my dad's youngest sister, Sharon, she's only 7 years older than I am, became part of the show. And one of the classic tricks that my dad does is the Hindu basket illusion, which is in the show and which I'll show you a video clip of a little bit later. Around about 1970, so I was born in March, and in April my dad saw an ad for Magician Needed in Kentucky, theme park, Guntown Mountain. Come to the brand new Guntown Mountain theme park, Old West Town, you can be our magician. And he answered the ad. He went down to Kentucky in May. He stayed there all summer long, performing 3 magic shows a day, every single day, throughout the summer. He was so inspired by that, being a young man of 22, that he decided that he was going to come back to Michigan and build his own Old West Town theme park. And since my uncle, Ollie, worked at the lumber yard in Filer City, Stronach actually, my dad started working there. He got lumber cheap, and he was able to build 4 or 5 buildings on land that my parents bought from my grandmother, Richmond. And so this is the general store, which my dad built, and this was going to be all part of the Old West Town. I think it was called Gunslinger's Gulch was the idea for the show. And again, a levitation with my mom. Around about that time, this would have been a little bit later, this would have been 1977, I would say, because Marissa looks like she's 1978. Marissa was born in 1977. So there's my dad and my mom, my sister and I. This is out in the Old West Town. By this time, I don't know if they just loved living there or what happened, but they decided that they weren't going to make a theme park. Maybe the location wasn't right. Maybe they just didn't want to have people coming in. But I grew up in basically what was an Old West Town, ghost town. My dad, by this time, was continuing to perform magic. You'll notice the full beard now. Continuing to perform magic and lots of publicity shots, and he would perform a lot during December. I remember one December he had 12 bookings, which was a challenge because he had to go to the Knights of Columbus, and then he had to go to the Moose, and then we had to go to Traverse City to go to a group, and we just kept on going around, and we had to pack up the show every weekend, and we only had like 1 vehicle, so that was always a challenge. My Aunt Sharon, now in her later teens, became like kind of the head assistant whenever she was available before she moved away to college. Around about 1979, 1980, my dad and one of his other magician friends were booked for a show in, I think, the Virgin Islands. And so they went down there and they had this really large show. Unfortunately, a lot of their illusions were like lost in transit. So they got there and they didn't have their illusions, and they had to kind of come up with a show to do until their illusions arrived. My mother, who's an artist, was always very helpful in the advertising. And my sister, there's my sister now, maybe 3 years old, she became, of course, eventually the assistant in the show. My dad, since being a magician just during the times when he would be booked, he had to have something else to do, so this is called Photography Magic Studio with Wayne Wissner. This was the sign way out in front of our house, and so he became a photographer. First he worked, well, he has kind of a long history of his career jobs, but he worked for the lumber company. Then, if you know the Ramsdell building that's right down on the corner down here, there's a restaurant in the lower level. He became a manager of that. He became the magician that would walk around from table to table while you were having your meal, and he would perform magic. Later on, he became a photographer for the News Advocate, which is, again, just down the street here. He took pictures of anything that the News Advocate needed. And then after that, he became his own photographer doing wedding photos and senior pictures and whatever people needed. Even my classmates got into this. This is my classmate Sean, so this would have been 1986. My sister. Around about that time, I think it was maybe actually backing up a little bit, maybe 1982, My dad, who had not been back to Guntown Mountain, saw that there was an opening for a magician again. And so he decided, you know, I really enjoyed that time down there. Marissa and Aaron are a little bit older now, and so I'm going to go back to Guntown. And this is Guntown Mountain, Cave City, Kentucky, near Mammoth Caves. So if you go down the freeway, you get off for the Mammoth Caves exit, right there is this theme park up on a mountain. In the background here, he has his magic shop where he would sell magic, and that was actually more of his revenue than just being a salaried employee doing magic shows 3 times a day, 6 days a week. But he would also have his magic shop, which is where he got actually more of his revenue out of. Right here, the Opera House, which was where he would perform along with the musicians. Here he is on stage doing various tricks, vanishing a ball, making a ball float, making a woman levitate, more of his dove acts. One of his signature tricks is linking rings, where he takes one ring and he links it with another ring, solid ring, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. This illusion requires an assistant of just the right temperament, so it's not always easy to find one. Luckily, at Guntown Mountain, they always made sure to hire women who were willing to do the magic tricks. So that was very helpful. And this is called the zigzag girl, where the center section of the woman is pulled over to the side. And that, for the very first time, the kid magicians will be performing tonight, this afternoon, with Arya as the star of the trick. Right, Arya? Yes. So my dad's been waiting for years, and every year or so he'll have everybody jump into there and see if they feel comfortable and if they're tall. And finally, actually Arya and Michael can both perform this now. So one of since my dad often did children's shows, he would often have tricks where the kids could come up. This one is a bird cage with like a little yellow bird inside, and the kids would hold on to it, and then it would be gone. The magic shop, my dad created this. I don't know if he made it the very first year he was on Guntown, but he was at Guntown from like 1982-ish until 1999, so for quite a while. This one is the needle through the balloon trick, which he liked to show off. There's his shop. He would not sell just magic tricks, he would also sell like little gag gifts. I remember he used to have this gum that tasted like pepper, but it looked like spearmint, and so it's like a gag. I remember going back to school and like offering one of my friends a piece of gum, and yeah, that went off really well. And here's one of his best sellers, actually, is the squirting toilet. So you would fill it with water, you'd put it on the toilet basin, and then when a guest came by, they would peek inside to see what's in there, and they'd get squirted in the face by this little water jet. So that's kind of the humor that my dad has. Again, here at Guntown Mountain in front of his magic shop, levitating. He loves doing levitations. And now we're moving closer to the 90s. You can see the beard is now gone. Going back just a second. So also at Guntown, and this is the only image I have of this, they had a medicine show. So this is the Farkey Anderson's Kaleidoscope Elixir. So he was out there barking this elixir, which it was a very funny show, but he didn't do it for too long. They actually hired someone to do this job particular because my dad was so good at it that they thought, you know, this is a good draw. We should just hire someone to do this full time. Guntown Mountain was only the summer thing, so he'd always come back to Michigan for the rest of the year. And here he is at Manistee Catholic Central. That's the Catholic high school and the elementary right here in town, performing for, I believe it's their Valentine's Day performance. He would also try to just get magic in the news any way he could. My parents put together a television pilot for a local TV station, 7 and 4, which was called Mr. Magic and Company. I think they produced actually 3 pilots. It was meant to replace Mr. Wizard or something that was on at the time, I can't remember. But for some reason there was a change of management at the station and that didn't turn out, but we do have a video somewhere, I haven't found it yet, of that show. As a photographer, this is my dad's most famous picture, made it into the National Enquirer. In Bear Lake, the church, the Methodist church, burned. We're not sure if it was arson or what happened, but my dad was outside and I was outside and we were taking pictures, and my dad caught a picture of a mysterious figure in the window. And it may not look like much from your distance, but it looks like this basically inside the window. So that made it into the National Enquirer and some other papers. This was a seance that my dad did. His favorite magician is Harry Houdini, and he was attempting to contact Houdini through a seance because his birthday was coming up, and Houdini died in the afternoon at 1:26, and so they did a seance. And I don't remember what the real result of this was. I don't think he actually contacted Houdini, but he certainly did give it a try. Back at Guntown Mountain every summer, lots of different magicians' assistants. And his show, which the kids' show is kind of based on his show, it's like the next iteration. A lot of the dialogue and the patter and just how the tricks are performed was based on the magicians, not just my dad, but on all the assistants coming up with different ideas as to how the show should go. For example, this trick, my dad is going to, he refuses to make a bottle disappear, but since he refuses to do it, the assistants, not to be put off, just do it themselves because, you know, they've been around magic enough to know how to do magic. A couple more classic tricks, making the bird disappear in the bag, making the cane disappear in the cloth, and here again is the Hindu basket illusion. This one I really like. I wish my dad would do this, and maybe he will another year. You take the silk, you put it in front, you pull it back, and it goes right through the cane. And it's like, and I didn't know how to do that for years. In fact, some of the tricks I still don't know how to do, which is kind of funny. More assistant photos. Apparently this was a popular assistant, I don't know. And now you can see the gray mustache. We're into the 2000s and the 2010s now. Retired. Now spending half the year in Michigan, half the year at their Florida house that they got after the real estate crash on cheap. And he spends a great deal of his time communicating with other magicians, and this is his office at home. He has lots of magician books, like hundreds of them, which he sometimes will buy and sell, and there's collectors of all of this magic stuff. Posters as well. Anything magic, people will buy and collect. In fact, my dad goes every year, more or less, to this huge magic collectors weekend, which is sometimes held in Las Vegas or sometimes in Chicago. And since he's a photographer, they'll invite him out to take pictures. And he loves going just to talk with the magicians, and a lot of them are friends of his that he's known over the years. A couple of his magician friends at the magic gathering. My dad, since he knows a lot of magicians, he's written about magicians. He's written 2 short books. One was just about being a theme park magician. The second one is that he managed to get a bunch of letters written by Houdini that were in a collection that went from hand to hand to hand, and finally he got a hold of them, and he was the very first person to actually read them and publish them. So for anyone who wants to read these letters, my dad's book is the only way to do that. And most of the book is the letters themselves, but then he puts in like some background, what was happening at the time. Here's my mom and my sister and Aria, 3 generations of female magicians in the family. And this was back in 2015, so this is about 4 years ago. This is about when the kids started performing. And they started performing at my parents' place in the barn. Around this time, my dad achieved the Excalibur level of the Order of Merlin, since he's been part of the Brotherhood of Magicians since the 60s. Here's one of the first tricks that the kids performed. We didn't have a stage, we just had a carpet and a few background panels. And I'll give you a look at this one. So this was 4 years ago. Today's show is going to be the 5th annual, so this was 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, so 4 years ago. Did I go forward a slide instead of? Come on. So if you come to the show tonight, you'll see the change in how this illusion is performed. Is this what? No, it's regular speed. So, what's that? So moving forward to 2016. So the first year they just did a few tricks. I mean, like 10 minutes worth. And so the second year, each kid wanted to do their own trick, and they all wanted to have a little more time. And by this time, Aria was getting comfortable with the cup and balls, which she is not performing tonight. So if you are coming tonight, this is your one chance to see this today. And this is a cute little trick as well, I think.
Theater production in the red barn.
And 1, 2, 3 cups. Don't worry, this is not a public event.
I think that's it for that one.
Who is that doing the waterfall? Is that me?
That's Anthony. So this was 3 years ago now. The first year, the only people who attended the performance were like my aunts and uncles. And that was about it, maybe 15, 20 people. The second year, my dad invited a few like neighbors, like Mr. Iverson, who likes to come and walk. And by the third year, there were a few changes. But before we get to that, my dad, everybody likes to ask him to do magic, and he loves performing magic. This was his, 50th high school reunion or something like that. It was 48, 58, 68 plus, 8, something like that. So one of his favorite illusions is the torn and restored newspaper. So he starts with today's newspaper, he tears it up, and when he originally started doing this trick, he was like, he would like tear it in a strip, he'd tear it in a strip, and then he'd turn it, and he'd tear it, and tear it, and tear it, and he'd stack them up, and he'd squash them, and then he'd unfold it. So that was when I was like little. But after Guntown Mountain, I mean, he did that trick thousands of times, and so now it's just, and he stuffs it all back together, and he restores it. It's one of his favorites. And the kids attempted to do that this year, but some of the tricks really require actually a lot of practice and skill, and this is one of the ones where you really have to be practiced on it. So 2 years ago, I don't know where my dad came up with this idea, but apparently he said, you know, I've got this bread barn, and it's mostly empty, and so he started building like a full theater, a full stage. And it's not like he's independently wealthy. You don't get wealthy retiring as a job as a theme park magician. But this is his like big screen that he purchased. And then, let's see if we can go full screen on this. So eventually he built a full stage, which we all helped in painting. And he put up all these curtains and everything, and you can see a number of his illusions in the background there. And it became quite an elaborate show, really. And so 2 years ago, the public pretty much on Facebook was invited, and we had maybe 90 or 100 people come to the main show. We also had even a couple dozen more at the final rehearsal. And so we're going to look at just one short clip out of this show. And at this point, the show is like almost 50 minutes.
You and I were doing in Ludington, and we were on a stage, and we were doing a trick called the Zigzag Girl Illusion. In this trick, she was in a big cabinet, and I shoved 2 swords and 2 big blades to cut her up. Aaron is back in the wings watching, and he's doing this. And all of a sudden, he came running out on stage, and he said, "No, Dad, no."
So this was the last trick. Again, one we're not doing tonight, but the last trick we did 2 years ago. It is very, very dark. More light would be appreciated. All right, let's see. And as I said, my dad loves doing levitations, so we didn't bring this levitation because we have a brand new levitation we're doing this year, but this is pretty much the classic levitation that my dad likes to do. This was the first time we performed it last year on stage, and the kids did a great job despite the fact that, well, you'll kind of see what happens in this one. So this year, last year, we really kind of maxed out capacity of the pole barn. So we had like over 100 people for the one show, and people were kind of crammed in, and they all brought their lawn chairs, and we had to open up the big door, and the sun from the west, setting sun, came in, and we kind of had just maxed it out. So at that point, we started talking about, well, is there another venue where people might come and see the show where we're not quite as cramped, that might have air conditioning, that might be dark, and maybe a stage. And of course, the first thing we thought of was the Ramsdell, because my dad has performed here, and my sister was married on the stage here, and I performed here as an actor when I was a teenager as well. And we were very happy that Xavier was willing to partner with us to bring this show. One thing I didn't mention was that each year that we did the show for the public, we would accept donations at the door, $3 or $4, whatever people had, and then we would take that donation and give it to a charitable cause. So a couple years ago, we gave it to the public library in Bear Lake, and then last year we gave it to the school in Bear Lake, because that's where we're from and where the studio is. But since we're performing in Manistee this year, we looked around at the various charities. We had 3 that we considered, and finally we decided on the Manistee Teen Center, which is located at the old high school at Sands Park. And that's a place where teenagers, actually kids from 10 and up, can go between 4 and 8 o'clock after school. It's a safe place, and inside they have like foosball and pool and all sorts of different things, and they can play outside on the skate park, and it's just a nice place. Doesn't have a lot of funding though, so whatever profits we have from this show are going to be donated to that, and of course the kids, this is a lesson for the kids as well in charity and charitable giving. So about a month ago, we came and checked out the stage here. We got some publicity shots. Not easy to get a shot of the Ramsdell in the back. We had to go across the street and use a zoom lens and stuff just to get it right. Then we rehearsed on the stage in Bear Lake. The show was so long by this point, though, we couldn't do a full rehearsal. We had to do one trick at a time. To get publicity, we sent the kids out with these little postcards into parades. My dad built this float, basically, to be hauled behind a vehicle. This was their picture at the Manistee parade. And as you can see, they're still wearing some of these shirts. They made these shirts on their own, pretty much, although my sister made a whole lot of them, like 20 of them, by hand. These are not like screen printed shirts. These are made by hand shirts. We contacted the News Advocate, the editor there, and she sent out a reporter, and so we had this big article in the News Advocate front page on the 2nd of July, so this would have been right before the parade, hoping that people would come to the parade. And this is the new levitation, so this is a pretty amazing levitation. This is done by... Huh?
Don't we have 2 levitations?
Probably. So this is pretty much a world-class levitation. It's used in a lot of very famous magic shows, but levitating this box and making it turn sideways and tip and upside down. Normally this would be like thousands of dollars to buy this sort of illusion, but my dad is able to understand most illusions well enough that he can construct them himself. So my dad's invested thousands of dollars into the show each year, building or buying new apparatus just so the kids can perform. So this is a hobby from his perspective, since we're not taking any money from the performances. So here's the article in the News Advocate. And then Xavier helped us make this into like an online ticketing thing. Originally it was just pay at the door, but now people can buy tickets online, and we already have over 100, 150 altogether seats sold for the 2 performances, which is wonderful. And my dad actually found another use for the stage. A year ago on the beach here in Manistee, he saw these performers playing violin. He thought they were awesome. Lennon, who is the 3rd nephew who is out fishing right now, he was so inspired he took up violin. My dad contacted these people and said, hey, you inspired us. If you ever come up this way, come do a show. And they were coming up for Frankfurt 4th of July, so on the 3rd of July, the evening, they performed on the stage in Bear Lake, which was very nice. At least it was very nice until the township, the zoning person sent us a letter and said, are you doing public performances out there? So, no, not really. It's a charity event. Oh, okay. Just don't do any more without telling me. So we have that. Another good reason for us to be at the Ramsdell this year. Last week, one of the things I told you that my dad went to Abbott's, the magic capital of the world, when he was a kid, and now he's taking our kids to the magic capital of the world to see performances. On the Wednesday show, they have like 4 performers up there, and that's an opportunity for our young magicians to see how other magicians perform similar tricks. Sometimes the same trick, sometimes very similar. And he has lots of friends. My dad has lots of friends there as well. This year, for some reason, apparently, I don't know if my dad set this up, but I got to be like the main assistant to this up-and-coming magician from Chicago. I don't remember his name at the moment, but I'm sure I will later. And of course, on Facebook, we've been trying to be very, very active, getting people out to the show. Last week on Thursday, we had to go get the car hauling. This is what you would put an automobile on the back of a race car. This is my uncle's, Charlie. I told you he's the mechanic. His truck and his trailer, and we had to load the whole show in. It barely fit. There's so many large illusions. Really, it barely fit. And everything's on wheels, which makes it doubly precarious because you trying to go around a corner. So we had to fit all this stuff into the back of the truck, bring it to Manistee for Saturday morning. I don't think my dad has ever taken the show this big anywhere because he never had a trailer. He had a van, but he had to break everything down into pieces, like the Zigzag Girl had to go into pieces. all these illusions. Here, let's see, Oscar, what, this was last week here. You got a picture in front of the poster in front of the building. And we got in on Saturday to start rehearsing. We had to do a lot of setup. We worked with the staff here to make sure everything's working, lights and sound. Nancy and Mick especially have been working with us all week, trying to get everything arranged backstage. Again, our stage isn't big enough to have everything arranged, so working on everything, bringing the background. Lots of blunders along the way since we'd never moved the show. I didn't know how to transport this background, and so we wound it up, which is the wrong way to do it apparently, because it takes an hour to unwind. 5 people an hour to unwind. So rehearsing and more rehearsing, tricks we've done before, tricks we haven't done before. Lennon, again, who's out fishing right now, he's a competitive gymnast. He goes to the gym 3 or 4 hours, 2 hours, 5 times a week? 2 hours, 3 times a week? 3 hours, 4 times a week, 12 hours a week. He does gymnastics practice. Aria doing one of her classic tricks. And of course, this is an opportunity for the kids to learn more about stagecraft and backstage. And so my boys were very interested in the sound and lighting yesterday or 2 days ago. They spent some time with Mick and Nancy just figuring all that out. They're also, all the kids are involved in theater one way or another in their local schools. A little more practice with the palanquin illusion. This was yesterday when my sister and I were practicing our illusion. We do just one illusion in the show, but it's one that the kids aren't tall enough for yet. So some illusions, I hope so. I hope we don't have to come out of the audience next year. So we're hoping everybody here will be filling the seats tonight. There's a 2 o'clock show and a 7 o'clock show. And yeah, so after I got this presentation all done, I went back to the title, and the title was Magic Through a Child's Eyes. And I had to think, well, who exactly was the child here? And so I thought, well, we've got the 5 children here, so of course they're learning magic from this perspective. But then I thought, it wasn't just them, because my sister and I, we were children. We grew up in a magic household, and we went to all the shows, and we spent weeks and even whole summers at Guntown helping out and being in the magic shop. And even before that, it was my aunts and my uncle and my dad who were the magicians. And, the history of magic goes back all the way to the beginning of trickery and illusion. So child's eyes, the magic through a child's eyes, that's everybody's eyes. And I still feel like a child when I'm watching tricks, trying to figure them out, being amazed. And I hope when you guys come to the show tonight, you have that feeling as well. So thanks for coming. I hope to see you at 2 o'clock or 7 o'clock or both. And if you haven't got a postcard yet, you're welcome to come up and get a postcard as a souvenir. We have lots of them.
So if anybody wants to take a quick 2-cent tour of the building, it'll be real fast. I'm going to take you around right now. Of course, we're not going to go backstage because we don't want to see all the top secret stuff. But you'll see the front of the theater and the ballroom, and yeah. So otherwise, have a great rest of the day. The box office is open right now if you want to get tickets, and it's just through this little name